how much do you want to separate the art from the artist?
That's where we're starting today? Okay.
Just with an easy, just a softball to kick us off, right? Let's do it.
I don't know the answer to this
feel?
question, and I don't know where because like, look, if you wanted to, how far back do you want to go and which artist? Because there was most artists are fucked up. Like, you look at writers, you look at musicians, and I feel that it is.
That was weird. At least call out game directors as well.
It's just me and Austin, is it?
Game directors and, not actors. Actors are actually typically all very balanced, normal people.
Famously completely balanced, normal people.
For the record, I wasn't going to contest this.
No drama with you.
I do, but I mean, those are typically the two people. Like Charles Bukowski, right? Pretty troubled dude. Hemingway, super troubled. You can go to Poe, Emily Dickinson. Like, you can name a bunch of world famous writers that are household names that weren't like, they're pretty upbeat, normal.
Ayn Rand.
Normal person. Ayn Rand.
Famously a very chill person.
Super chill, well-rounded, no extreme views.
I think Stephen King is one of the few that's kind of like...
Okay, that dude admitted that if he weren't writing books about fucked up shit, that he thought he would be a serial killer. He was like, I think I write about it, so I don't do it. Yeah.
Cool. I may need to do a little bit more research.
By the way, his book is amazing. You must have read Stephen King on writing.
On writing, right? Yes. And I find a little bit of it very frustrating because there are parts of that book that are just right, dude.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, okay, Stephen King. But yes, I have read it.
Yeah, On Writing is great. On Writing is one of the go-tos that I have that accomplished writers laugh at me for. They're like, stop reading that bullshit. I'm like,
no,
it's not bullshit. You've had an education, I haven't, and that's my thing. Is I'm always playing from behind.
You better be a better writer than Stephen King to call that book generally bullshit.
Advice on reading books about writing or anything else, if you want to be a writer, is to read everything, including things that are bad.
Absolutely.
Just read more.
Take the lesson. Yeah.
I had a friend of mine.
There's no one book that's correct. It's all bits and pieces here and there, right?
Yeah.
Sure. And it's also like, if it applies to you, if it helps you, it's useful, then great. If not, throw it away and find something else.
But even if it's not, then you can think about why you didn't find it useful and how it isn't compatible with your skills. So it's still useful to you.
There's never an excuse. And I'm saying this is from someone who pales in comparison. My level of academia and education compared to everybody else who's on the screen is way below everyone else's. Absolutely, inarguably. But I believe that you cannot try to excel at anything, and education should never be something that I try to stave off. I had a friend who was a writer. I was like, I don't know, man. I just kind of I like my raw vibe, and I like the way that I just kind of naturally do this. And I'm afraid that if I got into the system, that I would just be programmed to write a certain way. I was like, well, then you're not capable of. You're just blown by every whim and wave. As opposed to like...
There's so many composers that say the same thing. I don't really want to learn because I'm going to undermine my natural instincts. I'm like, that's like saying I don't want to broaden my vocabulary because the words that I'm using are already so perfect that I couldn't possibly
It's
hit
a big
the mark.
bet. It's a
I've
big
heard
bet.
people say
It's basically... There is a very small percentage of people who are born, geniuses and don't need to educate themselves and will be the best of their generation. But the odds are it's not you, right?
Well, I don't think that's true.
I would agree with Alanah. I'm pointing to Alanah. I also think that...
You don't think that's true?
You said you don't think geniuses need to educate themselves.
I don't think there's ever been a genius who didn't.
I'm saying that there are like once-in-a-generation people who... are brilliant and genius and don't,
I think geniuses learn faster. I think they still need to educate themselves, and if they're geniuses, they would.
Yeah. Well, my point is none of us are geniuses, so we all have to go and educate ourselves.
Well, all right.
Sure.
Well,
yeah. Especially as writers and just musicians, am I right?
Why does Alana's mic arm look such like an affront right now? It's just like...
For sure.
Yeah, dude, it's fucking power move.
It is powerful, yeah.
Yeah, bottom line, read.
Yeah.
Read specifically. Like... There's a lot of reading is. I really don't think that people read that much anymore. And there's a lot of studies that I was listening to this dude from Daily Stoic. If you have not hip to him, he's really, really cool. He's talking about specifically the practice of reading and the practice of literally writing. Not this, but writing is something that it's crucial to neuroplasticity. It's crucial to just us as people, we've been doing it for so long, and there's mechanics that our brain uses and our eyes use only on those two activities that if you just were to listen to stuff, it's not good. So I'm a big fan of podcasts, but I also still start my day every morning by reading for that simple fact. I just don't want to go. I'm trying to stay as I'm not afraid of it necessarily as much as Mike is of death, but I do want to do everything that I can to not have fuzzy brain when I'm in my 70s.
Yeah,
and
and
80s.
it totally helps with that too. There are two things that I've done since joining Santa Monica Studio. One is I buy any book that anybody at the studio ever offhandedly mentions. I don't go to people and say, hey, can you recommend me some books? Just anytime anybody mentions a book, I immediately buy it. And so I have this stack of books that and some of them are bad because they were talking about them negatively, but I buy all of them. And it's a good way to get books that I'd never even heard of. Some that are very good, some that are specifically about game design. There are tons of them. And the second one is all of the notes that I take, unless I need them to be legible for everyone else, I take all of my notes by hand. All of them are in notebooks written down because I feel like it just helps me remember.
I'm getting into that habit as well.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good shit.
I
you guys just saw the early composition of Journey.
Well, yeah, I'd get fired if I showed my notes, Austin. So
yeah, I'm banking on it being indecipherable, and I covered up the name of the project. But
I think you're okay.
But yeah, I'm very much the same. I like having a physical. My desk here is also covered in sticky notes that are an extension of the same thing. Where I there's that is definitely a thing.
I write, I was literally just writing, and I will do it with my iPad, especially writing lyrics or ideas or stuff like that. I will punt to typing as opposed to writing, for no other reason.
Yeah.
I think I'm faster.
Yeah.
And with that, I don't know why. It also transfers across devices. So if I'm not as skilled of a writer, so a lot of times if I have the idea, I must get it down in some tangible form immediately. That's a practice for me too, because I'll be like, I'll get back to that, and I'll lose the idea. And there's some people that I think have better retention.
A lot of lyricists just do voice memos rather than writing things down.
You should see mine. It's ridiculous.
You do the same thing?
Yes, I have voice memos. My voice memos is probably my most used app next to email.
Same.
Yeah.
Really?
Same.
I guess it makes sense of both of you. You are the listen.
I'll sit at the piano and make a 30-minute audio file of playing with some, even if it's 4 notes, just trying different permutations. And then 27 minutes in, I'll be like, that was it. That was it right there. And then because it actually was it, I actually don't need the memo at that point. But there's every now and again, I'll be like, fuck, I remember there was something in there and I'll have to go and sit there and go through the absolutely painful process of listening back to one of those.
Do you title it, or do you leave it just as the generic recording?
No, I do title them because I then immediately save them into the correct project folder. I'm pretty anal about the organization aspect of it.
Gross.
But this was also how I wrote these songs with Tripod we did almost everything as audio passing forward back and forth with on Stray Gods.
It's like postal service, man.
Literally. Why
did I say that so weird? Do you guys hear that?
Yeah.
Postal service.
It's like postal service.
Still learning.
All of my audio recordings are auditions, and I have one in here for some reason that's 4 seconds. That's called Alanah v. Austin.
Oh shit! Let's play that.
I don't remember this showdown.
You can always cut it out, but let's
That's
play
true.
it. Fuck you, Austin.
Yeah, it's like Vince.
Location. For fuck's sake, Austin.
Oh, that was a pickup.
Undisclosed location. For fuck's sake, Austin.
I had
pickup
to.
For what?
I had to. You said something was in a certain location, and you were like, "Can we cut that?" And it was too weird for me to cut it, so I had to add in undisclosed location over the top of everything. Because I couldn't. That makes sense.
But I like how you framed that as versus me.
Alanah v. Austin. It does say for fuck's sake, Austin.
I
was ruining everything.
I do like that the iPhone, who you might be familiar with,
Have heard of it.
does this now almost geotags your voice memos. I don't know if the Android does
it?
as well. So this will be on my home address, or it'll be hey, you're on the 101. or this was on the 405 or whatever, and it also gives you the date. So like mine, okay,
Most of mine would have been therefore like, yes, on the 405 or on the 101.
Wow.
Playing piano.
Yeah, dude, this is so much fun. This is from my earliest one is May 21st of 2016. That makes me sad because I'm sure there's earlier ones than that, but it's like early versions of songs. Here's me walking through St. Patrick's Cathedral and hearing a choir. Just like, oh man, these are great.
I definitely have been in hotel rooms following meetings, like doing an offsite fly to another city. I had this specifically happen once where I flew to a company out of the country. We had our meeting and they said, all right, well, when you get back to your studio, let's start working on like a theme, just a simple melody. So, yeah, well, I have a little piano app that Troy has had to hear many times recently.
Every damn session.
That's just like standard, like it's like a Casio, like it's just a very simple little piano, on the thing. And of course, it's really hard to play accurately because there's no
10,
physical.
Yeah, you've got like a total of like 17 keys.
Yeah,
on
at
that.
most.
So like, if you jump up an octave, Austin's like, so your notes are right when we're about to record. Fuck.
It's really difficult to play this thing with any kind of accuracy because you rely on feeling the physical placement difference between the black and the white keys to know where you are. And here it's just a flat screen of a phone. So I have absolutely no orientation.
Well, you just have to look at it, right?
But even then, it's so easy. If I'm off by a pixel, I hit the wrong key, So anyway, point being, I was in this hotel room and I was like, I have this idea for a theme and I want to iterate on it. And so I started recording the memo app in the background while playing this. Like,
Yours will do that?
Yeah, it'll record. But then what's funny is it's recording the microphone hearing this coming out of the speaker. It's not like an internal recording of the audio. The result of which is that it was loud as fuck. It's like, I think I have this. And I'm like talking over it with no perception. So it's just this absolutely painful thing to listen to because it's just this,
Bang.
like insanely loud, horrible. Of course, that won't come through because we'll do a second one for the.
Oh, it came through, I promise.
Well,
Yeah, we did hear it either way.
microphones.
It sounded the same volume at both of them, bizarrely.
Yeah.
Can I listen to the first one again? Just
The Zoom microphone
Can we
and the show microphone.
lose a little bit of the high end, Steve?
Mike, Mike Bethel, do you do the voice memo? Welcome to the show.
No, thank you.
What's your writing process, Mike? Where do you start out?
Go.
I don't think we've ever asked.
How do you write? Go.
How do you write? Well, first
Quill and
of all,
ink.
Wait.
I grabbed my copy of Stephen King's on writing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Flipped to a random page. No,
We're all right-handed, correct? Dominant, right hand dominant.
Left-footed, though.
Oh, that's interesting.
Left-footed?
I'm left-footed, yeah.
What the fuck does that mean?
My left foot forward when I
she's writing with her
snowboard
foot.
or
Yeah.
Okay.
skateboard or high
I was
jump.
like, what?
I actually remember
Two
that
left
being
feet?
the same when I haven't snowboarded in 20 years, but when I did, I also led with my left, which I remember people going, "That's odd that you're right-handed and you." Yeah.
Right now,
It's funny, I
Traveler's
totally forgot that.
ambidextrous, and I don't know if that's going to stick or if like there's some point where they decide what they're going to be. But he every time we're like, well, looks like he's left-handed. He goes, fuck you, and starts using his
Kind
right.
of cool.
It's
Anyway,
super
Mike,
cool.
how do you write?
How do you write, Mike?
How do I
And
write?
also, which foot is your dominant foot?
What is your dominant foot? That's the question.
I'm right-footed as well.
Good to
I'll
know.
take my answer off the air.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This podcast for me has a completely different vibe when I record it in the evening to when I record it in the day. Because I'm very
Yeah.
chill.
I'd
just
at
like
the
to
end of
point
the day,
out-
I'm kind of exhausted, and yeah, it's good.
Sunlight.
I'd like to
Mike
point
is
out that we
just-
kicked off with a kind of death of the author.
We'll get back to it. I'm keeping it
question,
in mind.
and then now we're
Probably
like,
not.
but wait, are you right-handed? Stop everything! I need to know.
More importantly, are you left-footed? I don't fucking
Yeah.
know. Am I right-handed? Right-footed? I've never.
yes,
How do you check?
you're right-footed. You would know if you weren't. Mike, how do you start out writing?
I don't remember.
This is becoming an existential thing. I'm looking at my feet.
I assume I used to, but it's been so long now. I start with paper for note taking.
I start with rock.
You start with rock. Okay, scissors for you, Austin.
He's not
and,
allowed to have
Yes, that's
scissors.
what's left.
Which hand do you hold the scissors in?
Well, what are
Yeah,
your
so
first notes though? Where do you begin?
I-
I gotta say, this feels very unnatural.
Put them down.
It's true. You'll witness a horrible mutilation.
Go on, Mike.
Oh, sorry. No, I just. I tend to start with like big, broad structure stuff. But to be honest, most of my that's when I'm literally sitting down to break a story or figure something out.
Would you start with plot?
Always.
Fuck plot.
It's like you're giving a
Structure.
TED talk, but where you're really annoying hecklers in the audience. It's a TED talk on writing, and we're
that's the show.
"Are you
That's the show.
right-footed?"
No.
Yeah, no. I always. I
Show us your left foot.
The short version is I write like a coder, so I start with structure, and usually that's plot, but generally plot through character arcs specifically. So like structure from a character driven kind of perspective, and then figure that through. Start with my beat sheets and go from there. I'm kind of hacky. Basically, I just write in a very hacky way. But then in terms of my notes and note taking, I'm a coder, so I write in Notepad, on the computer. I've just got pages and pages at any one time of different.
What if you're
text
not
files.
around that though? Do you hold the ideas in that giant?
I
cranium
love that
of
you
yours?
think there's any part of my job where I'm not sat in front of a computer.
That's true.
Basically, I'm actually, it's something I'm trying to improve and make more space for, because I do have the same thing Alana's describing, where the act of actually writing on a piece of paper, it helps my brain to kind of retain it and think it through. So I'm trying to get one of those e-ink notepads. I'm going to try playing with one of those for a bit. Because the problem is I just end up surrounded by post-it notes and bits of paper, so I'm going to be playing with that.
Yeah.
The thing that keeps me from doing that is I guess I'm a texture guy more than I thought I was, and even with the iPad, writing on an iPad. I know people.
Well, the
who are
e-ink ones
artists.
have texturing now, so they feel like a biro on paper. Apparently,
Do they? That's
what
cool.
I've heard. There's a production shortage in the one I want at the moment, so I'm waiting for it.
It seems so
Probably
strange
for a
that we
few
would
weeks.
spend thousands of dollars on this new technology to make it feel like the old technology.
That's right. That's fair, but I don't know how you are.
It's
but
more
I just
renewable
end up
source,
with
though.
I end up with 20 notepads all half filled, and it just
So I also
takes
have.
up space.
Right now I have a
And
plot
also the
notepad.
accessibility that Troy wants. You can pull that up
Yeah.
from a beach somewhere, or from a meeting in a different country, or
I'm terrible at it. I
Sure.
don't keep anything. And I found out Kerry's been keeping a lot of my old notes and stuff just because she knew I'd throw them out otherwise.
Yeah,
But,
I keep them all. I have a
I'm
plot
terrible at it.
notepad and a character notepad that currently I've filled twice. And then just here are a couple of binders that I have full that were all game previews. So you can see what I thought of Mass Effect Andromeda the first time I played it. Because I also, the way that I
That's cool.
take notes is pretty, I guess, direct.
This
if
level
I
sucks. I fucking hate this game.
See,
Kind
now-
of.
now-
Hold on,
now-
it's getting a little bit better.
Even at work,
Now I'm
I'm
trying
like,
to
this
remember
didn't
if
make
you-
any fucking sense to me. I absolutely write down what I'm thinking at the time, be like, what the fuck does that mean? Question mark, and then point to it
I'm
so I
trying
remember to
to,
ask later or
I'm
whatever.
trying to remember if you've ever done a preview of one of my games, because that would be an
I've never
amazing
previewed one of your
episode.
games, no.
I don't think you
Here's-
have, right? No.
Here's
Otherwise,
my
that
question.
would be a great 200th episode. Is Alana does a dramatic reading.
Thomas was alone.
Of her preview notes for Thomas's life.
I feel like there's a lot of shows that I watched
that.
or movies or what have you, where I actually recently just did this with walking through Vox Machina. I was watching that, and it's a terrific show. If you're the seventh person or person who hasn't seen that in the world, it's a bad joke. Don't worry about it. You should watch the show anyway. I was like, I can't believe they're doing that. I was kind of like, all right, this may be the point where I'm a little disappointed, and then they pay that off. And so I'm curious, especially as doing something that's review based or getting to that level of judgment early. I do this a lot in creative, whether I'm writing or thinking about something. And a friend of mine, Wayne Miller, is a great producer, musician, and songwriter, is the one that kind of instituted this protocol where it's don't jump between the creative roles. And there's the madman, the architect, the engineer, and the judge. I think it's or madman, the architect, the builder, and the judge.
Sounds like the HBO lineup.
Right?
And Barry.
This fall.
And Barry.
the purpose of it is, if you have an idea, just be in that idea space and don't worry about how it's going to happen. Don't worry how you're going to pull it off, or don't worry if it's going to be good or not. Just get the ideas out. And then once you feel like the ideas are there, then you can move into the structure. You can move into the, okay, let's sit this down. What does it look like? Here are my beat sheets. Let's pull out Stephen King's on writing or whatever. And then you actually write the thing, or you record the thing, or you make the thing. And then you can sit back and go, all right, is this good or bad?
See, it's so
that's a facet, because I could never work like that. I think that's
I don't think
really
I can
been
either.
a discipline for me.
It's a brain chemistry thing, maybe, because that sounds horrible to me. It's interesting how different people work. Sorry,
I don't think I could do that either.
I think it's making sure you don't jump to judgment too early. And
I
judgment
start
before
from
it's made.
judgment. I start from judgment.
Well, if you're-
I'm pragmatic as fuck.
If
Like,
you were
that's-
asking a question that would pertain to game reviews, there was a really interesting thing. I don't keep my game reviews because like those I did have to publish, thus I wrote them on a Google Doc or whatever. And you could go through the edit history, and I would generally start writing after like my first play session and then go through and change things. And those would significantly evolve from the start. Opinions I had to begin with
bet.
would be very different when I finish them.
But do you think there's anything persistent about that remained, even though you were like, oh, I thought they were going to do this, and they ended up not, that was way more clever?
Occasionally, but that would depend on the game. Like I think most games, when you review them, the review you wrote in the first day will only change a little bit towards the end. You can get a very good idea of what a game is after 5 hours, generally. I'm sure there are games that have done that, but I struggle to think of.
It'd be something
one
like
off the top of my
Inscription.
head.
The game that I
Inscription's a
introduced to
great
everyone.
example.
Yeah.
Do you feel like
have you
people
read-
should finish a game before? I'm sorry, I was trying to keep cutting you off. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask if you've read the book Blink of Malcolm Gladwell. He talks about how we onboard information essentially instantaneously on our subconscious level, and then sometimes it's really wrong, and sometimes it gets to the truth of the matter vastly more quickly than our conscious thinking brain.
It could still be an erroneous judgment, but it's more revelatory of us. Like that's like for an example, if I see someone who looks a certain way, I have a fantastic example of this I can get to later. But being able to look at someone and go, I have a judgment about that person. That could be a wrong judgment, but it still is reflective of who you are. That's what he talks about.
It's not arbitrary information. There's something that's driving it, and if you can learn to kind of really listen to those inner instincts, you can kind of speed up the process of getting your subconscious and your conscious mind sort of aligned with each other. And he uses a million interesting case studies in the book of people who had a snap judgment, and then it took quite a bit of due diligence to figure out how they even knew what they knew. And two of my favorites, there's one where they give people a game where they put like a stack of, I might be slightly fuzzying some of the details, but it was more or less a study where they put a deck of red cards and blue cards where below each, like on the other side of them, were numbers of positive or negative. And it was like, okay, you have 5 minutes, you can draw from either deck, and your goal, add the numbers together, and your goal is to get the highest possible total number. And what they discovered was one deck had a very slow rising average, and the other one was very volatile. So you would draw like 50 and think, oh, wow, that was a big number. And then it would draw like negative 75, and it would set you way back. And so after maybe 30 draws or something like that, people realized, okay, if the goal is to get the highest possible number, stick with the slow and steady deck. And they could figure that out relatively quickly. What was interesting is they hooked them up to like sensors measuring skin temperature and if their palms were sweating and their heart rate and that kind of thing. And they would start to show signs of anxiety within 3 draws on the volatile deck. Like their palms would get sweaty and their skin temperature would rise and things. Their body essentially was internalizing the idea, I can already pin this as a suspect way to win this game. But their brain hadn't consciously formed that thought until many draws later. But to the review one, the other case study was they did one where they took a survey of students at the start of a semester in university and said, rate your professor based on your anticipation of your appreciation of this class. And then like after like the first, day or whatever. And then they would take that measurement against their review of that professor from the final day of the semester and find that the 90% or some extremely high numbers reviews didn't change. And so then they kept going further and further with it, saying, okay, let's take the reviews after the first hour, after the first minute. And they got it all the way down to, it was like a second or 5 seconds of audio that had been EQ'd to completely obscure the actual words. All you heard was the tone of voice, and they still got nearly the same review as they did at
That's
the
why
end
we
of the
spend so
semester.
much time playtesting the first hour of a video game, everyone. Like first impressions matter, and it's what creates that foundation. People will forgive you for terrible game development and game design later down the line if you can nail that first hour. It's interesting what you said about the card game and the sweaty palms. It reminds me, I'm going to have to be very vague, but I'm giving like playtest feedback on someone else's game at the moment. And it's it's a very numbers-based game. It's very complicated maths. And I'm almost deliberately, just as like a test case, I'm playing it stupidly. Like I'm basically playing it on gut feel. And what's really interesting is that works. And it I can intuitively, completely abstract. It's nothing to do with any real world experience I would have. And it was really interesting talking to the designer about it, because basically it demonstrates how well balanced a system it is, that it's learnable in that way, that you can
Your gut
begin
feel
to
is your
intuit it.
subconscious solving the
So you're-
problems, right?
That's his success as a designer. That's not mine as a player, but it feels
Sure.
great as a player to kind of have that. And it's a really interesting. All of these things come up when you're doing like play testing and design process, because you're so much dealing with someone's subconscious as much as you are their conscious. That's why it's like Naughty Dog do so much with like recording players as they're playing and stuff, just because the things they tell you will be 10% of what you actually need from them in terms of feedback. It's
Are you
amazing.
saying on that game that the game was responding to how you played, or you're saying that it was enjoyable on multiple levels?
I was saying that the underlying maths. I'm sorry, I'm intentionally like vaguing it up, but the underlying kind of systems and maths mean that in the same way as you have a gut feel for like how much petrol you need to put in your car, it's the same thing of like, once you've been playing with those systems a bit, you get an intuitive sense of like, okay, I can do about this, or the game is giving me these affordances. And that's a good system, basically. If a game system can intuitively get you there, which is true of like most games, most players, when you're playing like, I don't know, playing Halo or something, hour 4, you're not making exclusively conscious choices. The player's not going, I need to shoot that bad guy, so I'm going to go and get. It's all automatic. It's that learned. It's grokking. Which another book, Theory of Fun, which again is like a very entry level design book that everyone should read. But like that book deals specifically with grokking.
Did you see, Alanah, do you already own that book, or were you
I do.
reading for your... Oh,
She
right.
must do, yeah.
do.
I said it, and it's like, it's honestly, it's like saying, hey,
It's
have you
just
guys
down
heard
there.
of like,
Look, this way.
you guys heard
The yellow
of, like,
one, I think.
Queen? They're really good. Like it's a good
Theory
it's
of Fun for Game Design.
yeah,
Ralph
it's
Koster.
who's a very clever fellow.
All right.
But yeah, grokking as a concept, the idea of like, you don't consciously think about brushing your teeth because you've just internalized that skill set.
Every day.
And good game design plays with that and uses that, and that's why games can feel transcendent and like experiences rather than just data entry, basically.
I do
So
often find that
back-
to be an interesting thing about the way that people talk about hard games, like the way people talk about Elden Ring in a way that's anti-accessibility. They talk about, it's meant to be hard.
Soulsborne.
Yeah, but there's no world in which they didn't play test that game to give you the exact experience that you're having. Yes, the game's supposed to be hard, but it's also very specifically designed for you to be able to finish it, as is
Cuphead,
every
same
game.
thing.
And specifically you to finish it.
Yeah.
Like that's the other thing with people, which people don't realize with playtesting, is it's very
I don't think
audience
Cuphead was
specific.
designed for me to finish it.
No, but like from a
Pretty close,
playtesting,
actually.
like something like
Haven't finished it
Elden
yet.
Ring, it's not that they playtested. We don't playtest games with generalized human audience. We playtest it with like a segment. We go, okay, who's the audience? Like for example, with like John Wick, we playtested it with John Wick fans who weren't into games and strategy gamers, and we kind of use those two sets to kind of balance and figure things out a lot, because we were like, these are the people who are likely to want to play this game. And the same is going to be true of Elden Ring, but where that intersects with the accessibility thing is if you're not playtesting with players who have those limitations on their abilities with the game or those kind of barriers, then you're going to miss stuff. And it's interesting watching. You're almost getting a new kind of subset of playtesting starting to come up, which is playtesting with a mind to accessibility, which is a much broader
It's a
range
huge thing.
of
Accessibility playtesting is an enormous thing now.
To
but
that end,
it's challenging because you can't just recruit, like with regular playtesting, you can just honestly recruit a bunch of like quote unquote gamers, and they're very easy to find that audience and offer them Complete
You have to
game
look
that's
for
not out yet.
specialists for
You have to
accessibility playtesting.
specialize on both the play testers need to be specialists, and then of course the people you're playtesting with need to specifically need those accessibility features. So it's a fascinating kind of emerging field.
Okay, so I remember a producer telling me one time in the studio, is like, turn off the radio, because if you're writing right now, you are automatically listening to the past, and you will, whether consciously or subconsciously, you will emulate what you're hearing, and it'll start sounding like that song, and you'll start singing like that person. You'll just naturally do that. So, as a game maker, I'm curious with everybody. You, Mike, being privy to that information, seeing the playtest, are you saying you can kind of start going, I know who's going to finish my game. I know who I'm making this game for. And then do you start either consciously or subconsciously, do you steer into designing for that person who is going to finish? Or do you have to make sure that you put some stopgaps so you don't just intentionally make it for that person?
You create, well, I think all design requires an understanding of an audience. All design is about, you're actively targeting someone.
Keep answering. Stand by. I have to answer I have to answer my door. Stand by.
The multiple someones.
You guys
right?
will find this pound.
Yeah, we'll be good. But yeah, you're always designing for
The 8-bit alarm.
Yeah.
And the design changes as you go through the process. I would say you've always got a goal in mind of who you're making a game for, and then you basically, over the course of game development, try and make that game better for that audience. That would be my expectation. Or you're different, Alanah?
Well, I'm trying to think of what I can say. I would think
you're going to be aiming for like 4 pillars with you. You're more going.
I'm not getting that in depth. I was going to say, I suspect that some AAA playtesting is broader than what you are saying.
100% has to be.
Whoever the fuck. In some cases, to just have as many people playtest as possible. But then I would also imagine that AAA can have the budget for a lot more people to playtest than.
And AAA needs to do that, because AAA needs to go after that broader audience. If I was, for example, working on first party games hypothetically for a popular games console, yeah, you better make a game that appeals to as big an audience as possible, because that's the audience who you need to buy PlayStations. That's not my audience. For an indie, that can actually be death. I'd say some of the weaker decisions I've made game design wise over the years have been trying to make a game that's quote unquote for everyone. That's separate to the accessibility conversation. All games should be accessible to everyone, but games don't need to be for everyone in terms of like the tastes of the individual, if that makes sense.
I get the impression from people that I talk to in AAA that the scale is so big that for the most part, you just want to make something that you and your team think is good. So it's hard to think of which player is going to like this, who is the audience, and why. And I'm sure there are people who do that, and marketing divisions are dedicated to that. But I feel like that would make me feel like I was drowning. My approach tends to be, I just want us in this room to think that the thing that has been assigned to us in this room is good collectively with all of our different experiences and tastes, rather than who is the audience for this. Because
90% of the time, that's the mode you're in. Like, in terms of like, when I'm talking to my team, we are conscious of that, and ultimately it's my job to, as director, to kind of have that in the back of my mind. But we don't bring that audience up every time we're having a design meeting. It's more, we're making what's good. You're fighting for the troops next to you, right? You're kind of building the thing in the room.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely something I have to personally kind of have in mind, that I'm not drifting too far away. But also, a lot of the time it's reactive. I've seen marketing teams.
Do you think it benefits indies to try to keep it smaller though? Like I would think that it does benefit you to create for a niche where you don't have the $1 billion marketing budget.
I think if anything, it just gives focus. And I think as well with indie, you don't need to sell to everyone in the indie space. You just need to sell to lots of people in a specific niche. I think the opportunities often in indie are to go, oh, that audience isn't being served. The one I keep going back to is the Mini-Me guys of who did like Desperados 3 and Shadow Tactics. It's like, yeah, they're great. And if you're like me and you were obsessed with Commandos as a teenager, you've not had a game like that for decades, and now boom, there it is. So no, I think that makes sense. What I was also going to say is it can also be reactive. Like, you don't necessarily, there's definitely projects where they've made the game and then realized who their audience is later, and then the marketing departments kind of figure that out. The
I was going to bring
there's
that up.
yeah, like you sometimes find that. I remember, or specifically, I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but like specifically, like what the focus should be. I remember hearing about, and it's a shame Troy's not here. The first Shadow of War game, like they didn't know what the Nemesis system was going to be a thing until they started doing like test reviews, basically, and suddenly that's the thing where it's like, okay,
I didn't know that.
this is the story I've heard. I don't know if it's true, but like basically, like yeah, it was a cool system in the game. But you know, in terms of like the massive focus that it got during marketing, that was very reactive to them doing test reviews and going, "Oh, this is the innovation. This is the thing that's like stands out." Because the rest of the game is good, but it's like it's a third person action open world game. Like it's something people have played. But yeah, so sometimes that can be found as well. But no, I think artists make for themselves, designers make for a specific audience. That was how I was trained, at least. That was the kind of, it's maybe a limiting perspective, but that's how I think.
I think I just feel like people underestimate the importance of playtesting across the board, or like how seriously studios take it. Because again, my thing with Elden Ring is like, people see that as a badge of honor if they finished it, like it's for some elite group. But fundamentally, all games are designed for you to be able to finish them. And so much time and effort goes into making sure you can finish them. From the start, it's let's make a game so people can finish it.
I think, but well, not necessarily finish, but that you like it enough that you tell someone to buy it. Like, that you are entertained by it, yeah.
I mean, Elden Ring is hard to finish. It's so fucking long. I doubt that many people finished it overall. But I just the effort is so
Angela's
there.
getting close.
Really? That's awesome.
It's insane. Her gaming consumption is so haphazard. She'll like get obsessed with a game for a week and then move on and then not play a game for 6 months, like any games. You know, she'll just she spends. Problem is, it's you can't really multitask playing games with being a visual artist, obviously. Like you need your hands. So she'll end up watching movies and TV if she wants to multitask. Otherwise, she'll just focus on painting. But this has become, because of the multiplayer component of Elden Ring, and she's got some friends back in Costa Rica who really love to party up and go, do shit. And in their case, they're higher level than her, so they love taking her to like to stuff she hadn't found. But she was showing me, like, she's only got, I think, a couple bosses left in the whole thing. She was, substantially high level, and I was like, how many hours of, like, I gather I've been pretty busy lately and getting home sort of late, and so
she's moved on.
So kind of, it's so funny. It's like I think her thing said it was like 120 hours or something that she's put in the game so far.
Towards the end. I haven't finished it. And
yeah, she's like level 150 or something, her character, which apparently I was like, what even is the level cap? Apparently it's way beyond that, but it's...
The Soulspawn community does an interesting thing with every release where the community decides on what the level cap should be and tries not to level above it, because that way you can make sure that you are able to multiplayer with as many people as possible, because you have to be in a level range. So I believe what they've decided for Elden Ring is that you should be around 150. So that you can still play with new players all the time, or as many.
It's so interesting how that game leaves a lot of the design up to the audience. Like, it's a fascinating.
With multiple
I don't know if it's
people,
good or bad. It's interesting though. It's really interesting.
With multiple people, I have jumped into their Elden Ring game because I heard about whatever build they have, just specifically to lead them to a certain area to get them a weapon or an armor set, and then I leave. Like, I've done that. Like, I'm just like, let me be your guide and just take you to this thing so you don't have to uncover the map. We don't have to like deal with the ruin surprises, but you need this shit at the start of the game. I think I've done it with probably 7 people. Really it's really fun though, being a guide, but I haven't finished it. I just paid a lot of attention to all the starting things.
That was the emergent social behavior that happened in Journey that I don't think anyone expected, is that all the white-robed people would go specifically
just to help,
to look for, because your robe has no if you're firing up a new account, your robe is literally just like pure red. There's no even kind of symbols or anything.
Oh, no way.
And so the white cloaked characters can see the difference between somebody who just hasn't found everything versus someone that has done nothing.
Whoa.
And it became like in the year or two after the game, especially when the community was at its most populated, that it became like this badge of honor of sorts for the sort of the white cloak folks to look for the most noob players possible to show them around.
If there aren't multiple people online for Journey right now, and you just play it by yourself and nobody comes to help you, would that slot get filled by an AI or something, or would it just you just wouldn't have help?
Nope.
No, but there's never
I played it that way.
Would there ever be a moment you've experienced Journey on your own, right? That surprises me. I'd have thought that game was still probably quite popular.
I mean, we just did Journey live in concert like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we did 2 shows, like a morning show and an evening show, or like a matinee rather and an evening, and then a sound check in the morning and a full rehearsal the night before, and every one of those instances are account connected to somebody.
Wow.
iPad. That's
where
it's
iPads.
Yeah, I have no idea what the ecosystem is like on iOS. I
don't
think there
was no
is
multiplayer.
any kind of
There was no. It was a completely solipsistic.
Does that make
experience.
the game feel
Really
different?
Yeah.
The
well, I can
takeaway
tell
would
you,
be different, right?
It's a totally different experience.
Yeah.
well, not to mention the fact that I can tell you that the music is the interactive music systems are connected to the multiplayer, so you will not hear the full score if you're 100%.
Wow.
Or
Alanah,
not even the full score, but kind of more the intention of the score, because each permutation is based upon what is procedurally generated by a player's game.
Can we go back to Alanah? Because I think it was a really good point you were making that maybe the audience wouldn't be aware of. But this basically the idea that so there are people listening, I'm sure. Still, probably
6.
But it is game design is about
stuff.
Game design is about affordances, which is I think what you were saying. The idea that there's no game that's not made with an audience in mind completely. Like if we made a game that was actually, hardcore, hyper difficult, no one would complete it. So by definition, all games
they all have to. You could have the hardest game
completable.
possible, then we walked back so that somebody could finish it.
Yeah. So it's like I've never really understood the whole kind of being smug about completing a game. It's
because someone
compared to
worked really hard to make sure that someone could finish it.
My question was specific to reviews. Do you feel that?
I know what you're going to ask. Do you have to finish it?
Do you have to finish it to give
a review? So, yes, I know that. I believe so. Yes, with some exceptions. So Elden Ring would be an exception. I think that most reviewers,
because there is no proper finish.
No, because it's impossible. Most reviewers played it for 170 hours to make sure they understood most of the content and only had 2 weeks to write the review. So getting that done is virtually impossible. I never reviewed a game that I hadn't finished personally.
You don't often hear me, waxing loquacious for empathy for reviewers.
It's not a standard, Troy.
I'm not effusive in my empathy for. But I will absolutely concede that the pressures that are put upon people in that position, who are willfully in that position, right? But that this is what they want to do, and I respect that. I truly do. Are doing so under the premise of you have 2 weeks to do this, and they're fighting a two-front battle because let's say that review code or the build that was given for the purposes of reviews got to them a little bit later, and then that they know that everybody else is going to have a deadline or is going to have their review out immediately when that embargo is lifted.
It's not even personal. It's your editor will say this has to be done by this date.
Yeah, but a lot of times it's not even being driven by one external factor. It's being driven by 7.
And the public.
Obviously, because that's the grand thing is the public wants to know, and whoever gets there first typically will be the one who gets to break it.
Sure.
So the fact that's that game. That's not the 7 other that are coming out.
So I reviewed plenty of games I didn't want to review that I was assigned and had to review because it was my job, so I didn't have a choice. Probably more often than not.
Would you say you crunched?
Yeah. Journalists crunch all the time. All the time. November is a nightmare.
Do you feel that needs to change? Is that being addressed?
No, because I think I've probably spoken about it on the show before. Nobody cares when it's journalists. People are like, shut up, you play games for a living. But I got pneumonia because I worked myself sick and then went to CES and worked another 4 days on a weekend and I got no days off and just
the pay is shit as well, right?
Wait, did you went to go see Yes the band?
No, CES in Vegas.
Oh, I went to go see Yes.
No,
I was like, why would you go see Yes?
And everyone hates you. You get harassed. For that was the weirdest thing about doing that job professionally was when I knew that I didn't like something and that everyone wanted me to like it and that I had to be the person to say this thing isn't good. And the harassment that I would get from that. And every time I'd be like, people are going to be so fucking mad at me, but I have to say what I think. So that was the worst part that I've never experienced in any other job, is knowing you're going to be harassed before something even goes live.
I do. That's fun. I do. I think we say this often, but anyone in position of anything, really, everyone is self-employed. Everyone is you. Nobody knows your limits. This goes for actors specifically. Nobody knows what is vocally stressful for you, and I've never worked with someone who, like, you're going to scream until blood comes out of your throat. And I've done plenty of sessions where that was the result. But that's on me. That's on me to go, I want to stop. I need to stop, because nobody wants it to be bad. Nobody wants it to be bad.
But with respect, like, that's not in like a QA department at a AAA studio. 100% they're being told to test the game until their nose bleeds. Like,
True.
100%.
They can't stop.
Like, that's not your experience as an actor, but like in terms of QA, in terms of dev teams, like, I have been taken to one side and told by bosses, if you leave before 9 p.m. every night this week, you are showing a lack of passion and you're not going to get promoted. Like, 100%.
You're not part of the family, Mike.
You're not part of the family here.
Sure.
Like, I think, like, it's personal responsibility is important for sure, but like, no, if you there are every worker in the games industry is being told that they have to do these things, otherwise they won't proceed, like, as in their careers, for sure.
I've never been in that position. I can't speak to it with that level of experience. All I can say is you have a choice, and the choice may be
Don't work in games.
Don't work in games, but that is your choice. And until the industry changes, that may be a reality for some people. What I do like, though, is that because of conversations like this, I have seen, be it incremental sometimes, change within the industry to where the big AAA studios are going. We're shifting our culture in order to do this. And they're feeling the growing pains of that. But
my concern is largely AAA shifting that culture out of the US, but they're still doing it. You can see a lot of interesting kind of reports coming out of emerging games industry hotspots in like Asia in particular, where outsourcing is becoming, is where people are being crunched in that way. Well, you'll often see like there's I'm definitely not in the mood to name names, but there are AAA studios who proudly proclaim that they're getting rid of crunch, or that they're going to 4-day weeks, or they're doing whatever, but they're still using outsourcers who crunch Asian game developers, just ones without Twitter accounts that are read by American press. So
Sure.
I worry that while the culture's shifting, it's shifting overseas. Like, it's not. Sorry, I'm a bit negative maybe. But
no,
like, yeah,
I would couple
it's
with
not
that.
fixing it.
I'm not.
I'm also not sure how I feel about it being a choice in that the way that I feel like that absolves the abuses. Like,
I don't think it absolves anything, but it also doesn't deny the fact that there's a choice.
I mean, yes, to an extent, right? Like, when I worked at IGN and I was crunching, partly that was my own fault. Sometimes I wanted to. But also they owned my visa. So if the choice was don't work in games, it's lose my job, leave the country with absolutely no money. Probably like be homeless while I try to save to get a flight back home to Australia
Right.
with all my stuff somehow.
Terrible.
Technically a choice, but what's the
Technically
choice?
a choice.
Really?
Technically
Like,
a choice.
it's not.
Is it a
that much
viable
of a
one?
choice.
I'm not saying it's not a viable one, but I think that also, by and large, we could agree that you had a very, very unique case.
Well, I mean,
Well,
all
then
Americans have health insurance, right? Like,
Yeah,
I
you
have
have to
more
opt to
of a
lose
choice.
that
As a
if you're
British-
unwell. I don't. Yes,
as a
it's
British-
a choice,
as a
but
British
it's like
developer, I had more of a
depends.
choice because
it's a scary
socialism.
choice. It's one that could be to your detriment. It's not just we'll get a new job. I feel like it's just more complicated than that.
So is the answer for someone to not have any personal responsibility?
No, of course not. It's to not work in the games industry. No, that's not true. I love what I do.
I
It
think
would seem to me that the way
Go
to
ahead.
address this, because I definitely come from a similar place where your question implies, Troy, of to me it always feels infantilizing to make it seem like the person facing the crunch and whatnot has no agency in the situation. But I recognize that everything that else is being said here is also true, that sometimes those choices resemble a kind of nuclear option that feel like, well, that didn't feel like a hell of a choice,
Right.
even though it's like you still have that on the table. The thing that I would add to it that I think softens the blow of that is if that is the state of things, like let's just assume that change is inevitable but slow and incremental in the practices that make that feel like such a unfair choice. If we just assume that's the case, then it would seem to me that it's incumbent on those in the know who care about how these choices affect people to broadcast to those considering joining the industry to know this will be the choice that you potentially find yourself facing, so that you're not Alanah going, I might be homeless if I decide this isn't worth it, but you're Alanah before applying for the visa going, is this a scenario that I'm willing to deal with because it is a reality I will be facing today. Now, I'm saying that does not mean that the incremental work to improve things or whatnot should therefore be the foot taken off the gas.
It's not an and, it's an and, not an or.
This is fresh in my mind because I literally yesterday I saw a tweet from a friend about how music schools don't, and Alanah, you responded, music schools don't teach business to music students very often. And so you get these people that are basically graduating with a mountain of debt and have no clue how to earn an income. And it's like all the musical training in the universe is essentially useless if you don't know how to actually monetize that. And I think it's a massive disservice to the point that I kind of don't really recommend university education to people anymore, because I'm like, most of that education can be found elsewhere. And meanwhile, it sets you really far back, potentially so far back, not just financially, but it's like the opportunity cost associated with that time, combined with the massive debt you incur, combined with the fact that they have given you no tools in your personal wherewithal to overcome and recoup on that debt and then actually profit long term, means I'm like, I don't understand what you're getting at this point. What is a piece of paper worth that to you? Certainly
not.
Well,
university in America, you're getting the ability to like go past a certain point in your career, right? Isn't that still the case in America?
Not in music.
No, if you're lucky enough to become a professional composer, which obviously is a limited pool of people, but like
I have been hired as a composer. If you add all of the projects big and small, I have like an Excel sheet that I have kept a record of every job I've ever done. And like if it's one job equals one line. So it doesn't matter if it's a huge project that takes years or if it was a TV commercial that took an afternoon. And all told, I've done something like 350 jobs. Not once has anyone ever asked me my academic credentials.
No, because you're Austin Wintry.
I don't get
I definitely,
the impression...
to the extent that means anything, I definitely wasn't that for the first 250 of those.
Yeah, hiring processes at either of the companies that I've been involved in hiring, like you'd read their resume, but I don't think anybody asks about the degree.
No, in the games industry, no, probably not. Usually,
I was able to get my visa and thus my green card because I went to university. So for that, it's very important to be able to get into the US. It's very important. But for hiring, I don't think anyone's ever been like, so how long did you study for and where and what were your favorite subjects?
In normal people jobs, though, in normal, like, non-games industry jobs, like, I definitely know Americans who've been, like real jobs, like in the real world.
I mean, that's why I qualified that.
Proper jobs.
Yeah,
music jobs.
Not made up jobs.
This is specifically why I was talking about getting a music degree, even within the subset, because it's even more it's even more true for this sliver than even the broader industry, because I imagine there are some departments, especially like bigger, big AAA, where it's a helpful screening process for them given a size of applicants or whatever, and so it probably does pay some kind of dividend for getting a job, like you said, a QA department or whatnot, where they need a certain number of people that they can throw at their QA needs, and they need to make sure that they're of a certain minimum level of proficiency in whatever skills they're looking for, and probably a university degree is going to be one decent filter for.
But I don't just mean hiring.
Folks.
I mean in terms of like promotion. Like I know there's several. I think there's companies in the comments. Let me know if I'm talking nonsense. But like I'm pretty sure there's quite a few games companies that famously you can't get past a certain level of management without having a degree.
Really?
Like still, it's a really old school way of doing it, but I've encountered that. I've heard stories about like people who've been excellent, and it doesn't mean, I'm sure there are ways around it. I'm sure if you work twice as hard, you can push past that ceiling. But still, like
the thing that stands out to me regarding a degree in terms of hiring processes in game development is that to me it indicates that somebody has worked with teams in a way that's very stressful. Whereas potentially if you haven't been to university, like I don't care what you studied, but you've probably had to do a group assignment with a deadline that was hard and you had to work together to do it. That's a good sign.
And you finished.
And you
the
did
degree, it. I remember a friend of mine, his dad was a senior vice president of a big company, and he was like, a degree is all that I look at. And there's a reason why. It has no idea. It could be a degree in basket weaving. I don't care. But you stuck it out for 4 years. And those are the kind of people that we want to see hired. It's like, totally get it. Totally understand that. And I think that there are things that you can show that, like me, I don't have a college education. I can demonstrate to an employer, and I have in the past, my stick-to-itiveness and my passion and my zeal and my self-startedness and everything. That would that be, if somebody gave me the chance, I could show them the same thing that paper is supposed to be indicative of.
Right.
And some people may not be as like, I'm not going to look at it. And there could be other people that, if you went to Stanford and they went to Yale or whatever, and they're like, I'm not even going to talk to that person, because there's that old school mentality. Going back to the original point, I just always find it, for me, it was really empowering.
The original point was death of the author.
Death of the author. Alanah was right. We're going to come back to this.
Yeah.
I find it incredibly empowering for someone to say, just to let you know, to Austin's point as well, you have a choice here. And to realize that you're not, I think some people, I felt this way too. I thought that when I walked into that studio, I was at their behest. And if I had someone one time in a session, I do not advise this, by the way, because I had to take the consequences of this action as well. But I had a director, we finished our work, and I looked at the script, I was like, guys, is there anything else? And the guy who was kind of like directing for the studio was like, that's all we have. And we finished early. And he was like, give me some more stuff. And he was like, well, we don't have any more stuff. He's like, he's not getting out of that booth until his time's up. I bought the time. I was like, excuse me?
Composers have done this with orchestras on sessions before as well.
Wow. He said, hey, actor, I booked you from 2 to 6. I got you from 2 to 6. And I went, and I took the headphones off, and I walked out of the booth and walked right past him into the parking lot. And I was like,
the
no,
thing
you don't.
That I think bothers me with the choice thing is, again, technically you're right. I just think that it requires a lot of privilege. I think that if you were a woman of color and you were to walk out, you'd never work again, because that would spread so fast that you'd be
You're
like,
a troublemaker.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yep. Troublemaker, bad to work with, unprofessional. Whereas on the privilege side of that, you are less likely to be attacked for doing something like that. And I think that's probably my issue with it across the board.
And you wouldn't do that at your first job, Troy, would you? That's something you did once you'd...
No, actually, it was something that I was...
it was earlier today.
I remember my first job.
It was me. It was John Wick. I remember
my first job, Lou Diamond Phillips. So I had a pilot for ABC that never got picked up. And the best thing that I got out of that was a friendship with that dude. And I had just quit smoking. And I saw him outside of his trailer smoking. I was like, I want to talk to him about Young Guns. And I walked out of my trailer. I was like, hey, man, can I bum a smoke? He's like, sure. And we just got to chatting up. And I said, let me ask you a question, man. At what point in your career did you... And he goes, stop. I was like, I haven't even asked you my question. He goes, you're already wrong. Because what I hear you asking me is, at what point do you think you will arrive? And the point is, you never will. If you believe in something, you ask for it from the jump. But you better damn well know that it's something you really believe in, because it may cost you everything. And that, to me, is the real thing. It's. I can't speak from someone who's a woman of color. I can't speak from that position. But if nothing else, if I'm talking to other 46-year-old dudes who are trying to do what they're passionate about, then I'm fine speaking to that one other person.
And I still totally think that you sharing your perspective is super, super valuable.
Totally.
Like you shouldn't not do that for sure. I just think, like I have two friends specifically who are both actors who are people of color who so frequently talk about, she did this and that's super annoying, or this actor did this and that's super annoying. We can't do that. The two people of color can't do that. They're like, no, I know, we can't do that. They don't feel like they can speak up for themselves because they're aware that their reputations will sink way, way, way faster than the white girl on set who showed up late and cried, or the dude who OD'd and didn't get any trouble. They as people of color are both like, no, we have to be perfect, or we will be the reason that you shouldn't hire people of color. And I think that is the thing where I just take choice as like it's also for people who are very underprivileged, who don't have money. It's very hard to leave a job like that
or just folks starting out, right? Like if you're
Yeah,
in your
I did
first
the same
job,
thing.
like,
I was broke. I've dug through my couch.
And you probably had jobs you hated that you didn't quit. You technically had the
and
choice,
Sure,
but you didn't
I
have the
yeah.
position to be able to
I did
do it.
have jobs that I hated that I quit, or I did have, and I shouldn't have. By the
really?
way. I should have stuck them out. Yeah, of course, man.
Fair play.
I will admit that I'm weird. I was told specifically you can't pierce your ears, and I went and I did it myself. So I mean, I don't think everybody should have that rebel renegade thing in there. And I'm trying to remember. There's a source for this quote that I wish that I could remember. Nobody could until somebody did. And again, I can't speak to such a swath of different people from different backgrounds and different situations. But I do know that throughout history we have marked and venerated those that when you're told that you can't and somebody did, those are the people that we revere. And I'm not saying that you should be that person or that there's some
I think I do that all the time. The amount of people who are like, you can't work at a AAA game studio and also have several comedy podcasts where you talk about brothels.
Watch this shit.
Legitimately, I've had people be like, you can't do both of these things. That's not, you can't.
I love the We're the Serious
do that.
podcast. You
I know.
do. That's what I like.
Well, no, the Video Game Writing 101 podcast is very
That's
serious.
true. That's real.
It's a very
That's
serious
actually more
show.
serious than this as well.
We've cried.
Way more
Have you
serious.
cried on Idiots That Abroad?
I laugh so hard I cry
That doesn't
almost
count.
every episode. I've not actually cried, no.
Right.
No emotions
Cry.
there. But that has been a thing. People are like, you can't do both of these things. And I think it still really frustrates people. And I was like, I can and I did. But that doesn't necessarily apply to people who have even more struggles than I would appearing professional where it is important. Because I get like, I strongly agree with nobody can until somebody does. But I still think there are caveats to that other people need to do
Always.
things
There will
slower
always be
and-
caveats. There will always be exceptions. There will always be reasons. There will always be all sorts of things.
I also want to state, when talking about privilege, if somebody's telling you that you have privilege, nobody's saying that you didn't work hard. And this is like for the audience. It's a thing that I think people get confused on a lot. Nobody's saying that you didn't work hard or that you weren't unfortunate or that your circumstances weren't extremely difficult. To tell somebody their privilege, if they're saying that you didn't have to work hard, they're a shitty person. That's not what privilege is. All it really means is just that you didn't have one particular barrier. So you didn't not get the job because
Sure.
you were black. That barrier doesn't exist for you. It's not to say you didn't work really fucking hard and throw your all at something and come from a bad place. And I think that's a real misconception. Is being privileged doesn't mean you didn't have to struggle. It
It's
just
not
means
a
you didn't have
diminishing term.
a particular struggle.
It's just like, just recognize the fact that you didn't have this working. I didn't have that working for me, and you didn't have this working against you.
Yeah.
That's a fair.
it.
It wasn't a fair playing field. Fuck, we got
Art
deep
and
this
the
one.
artist.
Art and the artist.
I think
Can you separate?
I
Go ahead.
can. I have
think you
a
can
little bit
separate?
of I can. I have a little bit of trouble with Michael Jackson. But I think everything else I'm all right with being like different things.
Yeah, man.
Doesn't mean it's
I
ethical.
struggle.
Doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. I just think I can do it.
I'm a judgmental prick. I can't get past it. I've never been able to. The second I to the point where I will actively try and avoid finding out that things I do like have like a bad person attached.
I haven't
Can't get past
watched.
it.
I haven't watched a single thing with Robin Williams since he passed. And I just it's
Oh, that's
not
framing it
because
in a positive way. That's interesting.
well,
That
yeah,
is
it's
interesting.
but it's the same thing. It's like I can't separate. I can't watch
bloke
Mrs. Doubtfire.
from-
Yeah,
yeah.
because it makes me sad. It makes me fucking sad, and that I don't typically get that affected. I went to go see Paul McCartney on Friday night, and part of the reason why was because I was like, I have the opportunity to go see a living legend.
Yep.
And especially after Charlie Watts died, where I was like, you'll never be able to see again the Stones.
That was me going to see Monty Python. Like,
Yeah,
100%
if you got the
same
chance,
thing. Yeah, this is it.
Fucking go, dude.
Yeah.
And I cried 3 times. There was when he did. I have to go, but I wanted to share this with you guys because I actually thought of you. Not you, Austin. The other two. Pan surprised me for my birthday with these tickets, and I was row 20, and I was 100 feet from Paul McCartney, and he's one of the ones that's just like I want to tick that box. And because a lot of the people that I wish that I could have seen have sadly departed. But that man at almost 80 years old gets up and he starts playing Let It Be. And I fought to just not have my phone up the entire show. 2.5 hours of just like my phone here because I wanted to capture it all because I want to remember it all. But one of the most beautiful moments was not looking at the stage, but catching out of the periphery, looking around as he's saying, "Let it be," and everybody having their phone up with the torch on, with the little light. And I looked around, 60,000, 75,000 people, just a sea of white lights. And I realized that everybody had the same thing that we fucking rebuke people for, and the same device that is used to just vitriolic rants of hatred and nastiness became the common tool of the most simplest expression of someone just going, "I'm here, I'm celebrating," and no matter what, across the divide. And there were people who were 6 years old and people who were 60 years old. There were people of all colors, all backgrounds, didn't matter. They were here to see McCartney. And for one moment, one song, 65,000 people were doing the same exact thing. And as much as I like to take the piss and be cynical, I fucking cried and I put my hand up.
Aww.
And I got to join in, and I was like, for this moment, it's possible to have community. And it was just like, if nothing else, that was Paul McCartney. He came out, he did one song, and he goes, "Give me a second to just drink you all in." And he took a beat and just looked, and the whole crowd just fucking exploded. So it was one of my favorite moments of that entire experience was realizing that it's possible for us to find something and even use something like this to unite us instead of divide us.
I mean, we absolutely can. We just don't most of the time. And it's a real bummer. Anyway, hi everyone. Welcome to Play, Watch, Listen. I'm Alanah.
Jesus Christ.
I'm a video game writer. That's Mike Bithell. He's a video game
When you
director.
find
That's
yourself
Troy
in
Baker.
times of trouble,
He's
Mother Mary comes to me.
Speaking words of
a
wisdom.
video game actor, and that's Austin Wintory. He's a video game composer. It's a beautiful story, Troy.
Oh, thank you.
I wish that we used our phones, which have the capacity to teach us a million things, for actually learning things.
Yeah.
It's hard to reckon with. Thanks, Elon.
and that's 50% of the comments. Thanks, Alan.
That's the
God.
Cheers.
fuck.
Thank you.